Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking an absolutely incredible story of endurance. It's one that spans millennia, a story of a people who were forged by water, rooted deep in the earth, and really defined by this unique kind of resilience, one that has been put to the test for thousands and thousands of years.
Okay, so let's just dive right in with a big question, one that really gets to the very heart of cultural identity. Is it possible for the ability to endure, to adapt, and to just thrive, to be something that's passed down through generations? Almost like a genetic trait?
Well, the story we're exploring today, it builds this incredibly powerful case that the answer is a profound, definite yes. By looking at everything from ancient bones to historical language and even modern economics, we can actually trace this continuous thread of resilience that begins thousands of years ago.
So where does a story like this even begin? Well, it's not in the pages of history books. Nope. We have to go deeper. We start deep in the prehistoric soil of northern Vietnam's Red River Delta. This is where it all started. This is the bedrock.
Just look at the incredible scope of this timeline. We kick things off 7,000 years ago. That's 7,000, when a group called the Dabut culture faced a world-changing crisis. Then we're going to jump forward to a site from 4,000 years ago that reveals the very birth of the modern Vietnamese people. Let's start with that first point.
So picture this, 7,000 years ago. The world gets warmer, the seas rise, and the lands of the Dabut people get flooded. Now most people would leave, right? But instead of fleeing, they stayed. They completely reinvented their entire way of life. They turned from the forest to the sea, they developed brand new tools, and they mastered the water. This is the very first recorded instance of what's been called a resilience of the sea, a flat-out refusal to abandon their home.
All right, fast forward 3,000 years. We're at a site called Man Back. An ancient DNA analysis shows something absolutely incredible, a fusion. You have the local hunter-gatherers who had this deep, intimate knowledge of the tropical environment, and they start mixing with migrating rice farmers from the north who brought amazing new technology. This wasn't a conquest, it was a synthesis. It was the creation of a brand new, genetically diverse people with what scientists call hybrid vigor. And the whole idea of hard work, it's literally etched into the skeletons of these ancestors. I'm not kidding. Bioarchaeologists found things like degenerative joint disease and spinal modifications in both men and women, the unmistakable signs of a life spent in really intense collective labor, all to tame the land and grow that rice.
But maybe the most profound, the most moving discovery is this one, Burial M9. It held the remains of a young man with a severe congenital disorder. He couldn't work, he couldn't feed himself, and yet he lived for about 20 years. That tells you everything. It shows that 4,000 years ago, this society was already defined by this deep-seated compassion, a social resilience that took care of its most vulnerable members.
So, you've got this foundation, right? Adaptation, hard work, and social care. Now, let's see how that prehistoric resilience got tested against one of the biggest challenges a culture can ever face, a solid millennium of foreign domination. For 1,000 years, the entire administration, all the elites, they operated in Chinese. But in the homes, in the villages, the people kept speaking their native tongue. The language itself became this incredible fortress, this protective bubble around the family and the village. It was the first and most important line of defense against being completely assimilated. This ancient proverb, Phép vua tua late lang, this is the key to understanding Vietnamese political resilience. It means the king's law yields to the customs of the village. And that reveals this fundamental truth. Central power has always stopped at the village gate. Behind that bamboo hedge, every single village was its own autonomous, self-governing unit. So sure, you could conquer the capital, but you could never, ever truly conquer thousands of these independent villages.
So you have to ask, what was the engine inside these tiny, indestructible villages? Well, the material we're looking at argues pretty convincingly that the internal strength of the family, and by extension the entire village, was and still is overwhelmingly shaped by the power of women. And this brings us to this amazing concept of the Nội Tướng. Now, while a husband might be the public face of the family, his wife is the general of the interior. She is the family's chief financial officer, she's the head of education, and she is the absolute commander of the household, making sure it's stable and that it survives. And this system isn't just some quaint tradition. It is a highly effective economic survival strategy. The person earning the income hands over control to the general of the interior, who is culturally conditioned to be thrifty, to avoid risk, and to focus on the long-term security of the family. This makes that core family unit incredibly resilient against pretty much anything: economic shocks, famine, or even war.
This reverence for feminine power isn't just a social thing, it's spiritual. The indigenous belief system, Dao Mao, is all about worshipping the mother goddesses of the natural world. So in this worldview, the very life force of the nation, the fruitful land itself, is female. It just reinforces this idea that stability and life flow from this powerful feminine core.
Okay, so that's the history. But what about today? Let's see how these ancient traits, we're talking hard work, community care, and that strategic management, how they're manifesting right now, not just in Vietnam, but as a really powerful economic force all around the world.
This is a stunning example: the U.S. nail industry. It's a story that started with just 20 refugees back in 1975, and it has absolutely exploded into a multi-billion-dollar industry where Vietnamese Americans own about half all nail salons in the country. They didn't just take jobs. They applied their ethos of hard work and efficiency to totally democratize a luxury service, making it accessible for everyone.
And this isn't a one-off thing. You see this pattern of adding value repeating itself all over the globe, just adapting to new environments. In France, that focus on discipline translates into incredible intellectual achievement in fields like mathematics. In Australia, that deep, fruitful land expertise has been used to revitalize aging farm districts, basically turning them into food bowls for the nation. The context changes, but that core value of contributing, it stays the same.
So, finally, what's the psychological software, the operating system that powers all of this? Let's explore the cultural mindset that underpins this entire incredible story of endurance.
At the very core is a concept called chịu đựng. Now, it's often translated as endurance, but that doesn't quite capture it. It's an active, disciplined ability to absorb hardship, to suffer without breaking. It was forged by millennia of living in a land where a single typhoon could wipe out a whole year's work in an hour. This isn't about being passive. It's like having psychological armor.
And on the world stage, this psychology becomes what's known as bamboo diplomacy. Just like a stalk of bamboo, the policy has unbreakably strong roots. That's the fierce commitment to independence and identity. But its branches, they're flexible. They sway with the political winds to avoid getting snapped. It's how Vietnam can successfully maintain strong relationships with global rivals at the same time, ensuring its survival through pure pragmatism.
So, from the adaptation of ancient peoples to rising seas, to the compassion shown in a 4,000-year-old burial, all the way to the economic ingenuity of the global diaspora today, a really clear story emerges, and it leaves us with this one final thought. If a culture's deepest identity is forged in its most ancient struggles, what does a 7,000-year history of unbreakable resilience tell us about what is yet to come?